Hello. This is my mind map that I created with multiple motifs and artistic designs that are all intentional to reflect indigenous culture. So first I would like to talk about the Salish eye, which is this here. So this eye represents watchfulness and the presence of future and past generations. And I combine this concept with two-eyed seeing, which is an important practice that represents the balance between looking at things with a lens of both an indigenous and Western point of view. And it is important when you are viewing indigenous art and things like that, viewing the land as a resource and something that is deeply spiritual, and it is important to be respectful. Next, I would like to talk about this part here and this part. So I put a quote that says, "Land is a relationship, not real estate." And I think this is represented by the Doctrine of Discovery and the Royal Proclamation, how their land was treated like real estate, as in something that can be purchased. But we learn from indigenous culture that the land is extremely sacred to their practices and way of life. So a little bit on the Doctrine of Discovery and the Royal Proclamation. I have a bit of a timeline. So from the 15th century papal bills, they defined indigenous peoples as occupants in their own land, and also it let European crowns buy the land as their own, treating their land as real estate. And then we see in 1763, which is the Royal Proclamation, it later redefined indigenous land as ceded and only allowed to be purchased by the crown. And then there's a sharp contrast over here when I did a little bit of an analysis on Susan Point and her art. So I drew some of her artwork right here, as you can see, the Tree of Life and the Pacific Spirit number 91. And I did a little bit of an analysis on her artwork. Stated how she is a Musqueam artist who has expanded far past cedar using blown glass, concrete, and much more. I further explained how her art leaves a lasting impact on Musqueam traditions, demonstrating the interconnectedness of land, sky, and person, how she inspires other artists as well. And then I also explained a bit of the Indian Act, as I believe it is a vital part of Canadian history and explaining the persecution of Indigenous peoples in our country. I did a little bit of a timeline demonstrating how the Indian Act has changed over time and changed in purpose to indoctrinate their people, and then how still today it affects Indigenous communities, as defining the term Indian as being you need to have a certain amount of blood percentage, which slowly will disintegrate the race. And then I chose some different colors. Red in indigenous culture represents blood and connectedness between people. Green, I think, signifies the earth, the ground, which they're so connected with. And then finally, blue is the sky. Motifs like the eagle and the raven are extremely important in indigenous culture, so I thought I would include a representation of the sky. Finally, I did include some imagery such as an evil judge to represent how Canadian law has harmed Indigenous culture, and then also included a few bills to show how the law has also affected Indigenous people. All in all, this is a very reflective experience to go over what I've learned so far in this course and reflecting on how Indigenous people have been persecuted in Canadian history and how they continue to thrive as a society and a culture in modern day. Thank you for listening.